The show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Whether you're new to sales or a lifetime veteran, the Blackbelt Sales Podcast will sharpen your sword and guide you to master the art of sales. And now, here's your host, the ninja himself, Gene Slade.
Hey, welcome back to the Blackbelt Sales Podcast. I got Don Johnson in the booth with me this morning. What's up, Don? How's it going, man?
Good morning, Gene. It's a wonderful day.
It is a beautiful day, man. We're not too far. We're going to date the show right now, but we're not too far from a big day for our country, Election Day. Did you vote yet?
Oh, I thought we were talking. No, I haven't voted yet, but I thought we were talking college football. So, okay, I thought that was
yeah.
Here in the
Well,
South. It is a big day. Saturday in the South. So, okay.
Yeah, it's Tuesday, and you're already talking about Saturday. Isn't that funny? I mean, now you know Don's a real fan, but no, that is coming up. What's your game going to be? Auburn and what?
Well, I love to watch all the SEC games. Auburn hasn't done very well this season at all, but we're winning about 3 of the quarters every game, and then losing the 4th and the whole game at the end. So I don't know how we can win 3 of the quarters and lose the game, but we've mastered that. We're getting that taken care of. So, but good again. We just love SEC football. Getting the Georgia game, that's the big game for the weekend. The Georgia-Florida, that's exciting. Obviously, following what's Texas doing, what's Alabama doing, what's all these new teams in the SEC doing? Are they worthy of being in here in the SEC?
Well, maybe I'll wear my Lead Ninja shirt to the game in the Georgia and Florida game this week and see if you can just pick out the one black shirt in the audience. we were fortunate enough to we're friends with Patrick Lang, right?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, Patrick Lang. For those of you who don't know him, he's a broker who helps people to buy and sell businesses. And we become friends with him over the years and saw him at the last game that we were at. And so he has invited us to come up for the largest cocktail party of the year. And we're going to meet some other clients up there. So we're going to be doing some business and watching the game and having a good time. So I'm excited about that. I've never been to a game over there at Jacksonville, and neither is Brittany. And this is like bucket list for her. So we're excited.
Absolutely. Congrats.
So
that'll be fun.
Guys, today let's get into talking about how to establish a need for ductwork. And this is a great time of year to be selling ductwork, especially in the southeastern part of the country or the southern part of the country, right? Because, heck, in the summertime, it is a real bear to work in those attics, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And sometimes we leave a lot of money on the table in this business. And ductwork is probably as expensive nowadays, or costs as much because of the labor as a new system costs. And we don't want you to have your guys on the bench. We don't want your guys to be moving around to other companies because you don't have the work for them. So why don't we talk about the inherent problems with duct systems? The Department of Energy, I think it's Department of Energy, says that like 90% of systems have got refrigerant problems, right? And in my experience, over 85% of duct systems have got massive, and I'm not talking about small, but massive energy wasting, comfort robbing mistakes. You guys probably didn't know, but I am an expert when it comes to ductwork. So, Don, what are some of those problems that we want to train our technicians to look for? Or what's the number one problem that we want to train them to look for to be able to spot whether or not we've got ductwork problems? And then we can talk about how to establish a need with the client.
Well, where you will find probably the biggest issue is duct pressure. We know that the industry wants to call it static pressure, but again, if you're just talking duct pressure, most every system is very restrictive for the airflow. And if you're restricting the airflow through the duct system, you're really not getting the performance or the capacity out of an air conditioning system at all. They truly do have to be matched. And rarely do you see proper matching unless someone who takes this course or takes a very good energy building performance course looks at both at the same time. Most of the time we want to look at changing the boxes and then later doing the ductwork, but you got to look at both of them together, and that's a big part of it. So duct pressure, static pressure, that's a big issue. And that's really comes down to this: is the ductwork sized properly? Is the ductwork sized properly? Now, obviously, you can have a lot of growth, you can have a lot of bacteria, we can have a lot of mold in these systems, and that's a problem in itself. But it usually comes down to the airflow being a culprit of that issue.
So you said performance and capacity. So let me just break that down on 3rd to 5th grade reading level, guys. If we've got high static pressure, first of all, we probably want to get rid of that term static pressure. Maybe just call it duct pressure so that clients can make the connection of what you're talking about. You can let them know it's kind of like blood pressure. But Don says it's going to, if you have duct pressure that's too high, you won't move the right amount of air. And so it's going to affect the performance and the capacity, which really just means that it's going to cost a lot more money to operate that system. That's what he meant by that. It's going to cost a lot more money to operate the system. They're overpaying the utility company to operate that system as a result of undersized ductwork. That's what high static pressure tells you. And then capacity. Did you know that if you don't move the right amount of air, like there's something called a fan curve, and if you don't move the right amount of air, then you're not getting the right tonnage. You're not getting the capacity. So you could have a 5-ton system that's only moving 3.5 tons of air and getting 3.5 tons worth of cooling, yet you paid for a 5. And did you know that if it's a high efficiency system, especially one of the variable systems, indoor and outdoor, that if that ductwork is undersized, you're not going to remove humidity. And if you don't remove humidity, that system's not going to remove the temperature anywhere near the way it could. You might only end up with a 13, 14, 15 degree split between the air that's coming in and the air that's coming out. So that's what we're talking about. It's costing a lot more money to run, which does that mean, Don, that they're paying for it, whether they get it or not, a new duct system potentially?
Absolutely.
So there's duct pressure. So guys, you want to get, in my opinion, you want to get a magnehelic gauge, not a manometer. You can get one of those too. But my experience, especially with most of the clients that we're dealing with, they're typically over 40. Let's say that the majority of them. They trust manual devices more than they trust electronic devices or digital devices. So I would get one of the ones that's the dial that goes from 0 to 1.0 that you can manually, what do you call it? Calibrate, Don?
Yeah.
With a screwdriver.
That's one of those 3rd grade words. We'll adjust it.
Yeah. So and the reason that I say this, I've always used one, but I decided one day I was going to get the electronic ones. And man, if I used that 10 times and 3 people didn't say to me, how do I know that's calibrated correctly? Like I wish that I hadn't even bought the tool. It was great to have for myself, but that it didn't have the trust factor that a manual gauge had with my client. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So get yourself a magnehelic. Make sure you've got pitot tubes, the ones with the little L on them, so you can properly get static pressure. And heck, if you want to learn how to use it more, you probably want to get into one of our programs. But Don, let's talk about duct leakage now, right? How many duct systems leak?
It's probably how many don't leak, but the number is staggering how many leak. What is the EPA, or where the EPA says it's like 40% of the duct systems leak or so?
Yeah, and the Department of Energy says that on the average duct system leaks somewhere between 25 to 30% of the air that goes through it on average.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that's wild. So let's just take a 3-ton air conditioning system. Would you say that's probably the average in the United States, or 2.5 ton? 2.5 tons probably an easier example, right?
Okay, 2.5.
Because we can make it even CFM, right? It's super easy to calculate stuff with 0 at the end. So if we got a 2.5 ton system, how many CFM is that supposed to move, guys? 2.5 times 400 CFM per ton, that's 1,000 CFM, right? And if I've got 25% leakage, let's say half of it is on the supply, half it's on the return. I mean, 25% leakage, that's the entire duct system they're measuring, right? Let's just say half of that's coming from return and half of it's coming from supply. How many CFM am I pulling in from the attic if the duct system's in the attic, or from the crawl space if the duct system's in the crawl space? What's half of 25%? We're taking the low number. That's 12.5%, right? So 12.5% of 1,000 is what, Don?
125.
So 125 CFM is being sucked in from the attic or the crawl space. Question, would you live down in your crawl space or in your attic? Another question, have you ever taken a super bright light and shined it in your attic? What did you see floating in the air? Was that fiberglass insulation from the attic? Have you read a package of insulation? Did you know that it says right on the insulation that it's known to the state of California as a cancer-causing agent in the same categories as cigarette smoke and asbestos? And you're sucking 125 cubic feet of air per minute, right into your house and blowing it into your living environment. Do you know that they've done studies that have proven that about 85% of the particles that are in our air, in our house, and our dust are fiberglass insulation from our attic? Do you think that that's good to breathe? Do you have a good filter? Are you the filter? Lots of questions here. Okay. So also, did you know, at least here in Florida, that for every 100 CFM of return leakage we have, that adds 10 gallons of moisture to the house a day? Imagine somebody coming into your house with 2 5-gallon buckets full of water sloshing as they walk across your floor, and then they just dump them on your floor. Do you know that if you got 100 CFM of return leakage in your house, that is the equivalent of dumping 10 gallons of water on the floor, asking the air conditioner to pull that out first and then cool your house? Crazy, right?
Very crazy. Can you see now why so many people have us seal their ductwork when they get in this condition?
Beautiful question. Now, let's take it a step further. I've got a 0.6 duct pressure. The maximum I'm supposed to have on most systems is going to be 0.5. All right. I know some of them will go up to a full inch of static, but that's going to cause problems. We can talk about that later. It's going to cause lots of problems. But if we're at a 0.6, that means we're 20% higher than the maximum allowed by the manufacturer. Do you think that the manufacturer, if they knew how their equipment was hooked up, do you think that they would allow you to have the warranty that they gave you? Is that system considered improperly installed if it's on a duct system that's too small for it? And then if I go and sell an AeroSeal and I seal that duct system up and I didn't take the static pressure, you know who you are out there. Those of you who are selling duct sealing without checking the pressure on the ductwork, some could say that you're guilty of malpractice because you got a 0.6 duct pressure. You seal that shit up. Is the pressure going to go up or down?
It's going
What's
up.
going to happen? Guys,
We're
if you're watching this live, please put live down in the comments. If you're watching this on replay, put replay down in the comments. All right. And if you want more training like this, you want to get granular and you want to really start selling duct systems. I mean, 20 years ago, Don, my first duct sales job, I mean, I was selling ductwork in addition to IAQ and equipment. I sold over $1 million personally in ductwork my first 6 months at that job 20 years ago. So
Yes.
we know how to sell ductwork. What's up, Andrew? Good to see you, brother. If you want more training on how to do that and you want to add millions in ductwork to your business, you just give us a call. Hit me up on my cell phone number. I'm going to put it on the screen down below. It's 239-848-6533. 239-848-6533. Just text me your name and say, hey, I want to learn more about selling ductwork. Okay. So Don, we seal that duct system up that's already undersized, and we end up sending the compressor into a heart attack. Right. Because we're not evaporating what in the evaporator coil? We're not evaporating our refrigerant. And then what do we send back to the compressor, Don?
Yeah, it's liquid. I mean, it's the liquid goes right back. And is a compressor a liquid pump or a gas pump, an air pump, right? It has to be in the form of a vapor, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're doing permanent and irreversible damage, where you're doing permanent and irreversible damage when you send a liquid back to your compressor.
Did you know that can also cause your coil to freeze up on you? So, guys, be very, very careful. A lot of you are sealing up duct systems or even cleaning duct systems that need to be replaced. Okay. And if you've got one other quick tip for you, if you've got an undersized return and a supply that's okay, and then you double the size of that return, where's the pressure going to transfer to? It's going to transfer to the supply. Okay. Many times I've seen guys come in and they've got a duct system that's at 0.6, 0.7. They're like, we'll just add some return to it to lower the pressure down to 0.5. That's not how this works. Okay. If you put more air into that system, the pressure on the supply side goes up. All right. So you can't just go in and just add returns and expect that you're going to be doing the right thing for the customer. All right. You got to make sure you can get that air out of the machine too. So Don, what else? What am I leaving out, man?
Well, many systems have growth in them, and that high static pressure is sucking that moisture on an air handler situation, is sucking that moisture into that ductwork. Have you ever seen the first 3-4 feet of the duct system? It feels wet. And, did you know that that's an indicator of your duct pressure issues when you see that? What's going to happen when you really put that moisture into, on the fiberglass and in that duct system? It's really just going to be a feeding ground for even more stuff. So we're going to accelerate a problem if we're seeing some little black spots and dots and mold in the system. That static pressure, it's feeding all that moisture down the line. Typically, we see growth on the coil because it's the wet. That's where the water is, where the moisture is. We're bringing the humidity, condensating it. That's where the moisture is. But we really affect the growth and messing up the ductwork when we start spitting that water into that duct system. Those first 3, 4, 5 feet become just, again, a breeding ground for even more stuff.
And in horizontal systems, it's way more common, y'all, because like on a vertical, that moisture is fighting against gravity, right? Mm-hmm. But in a horizontal, if our duct pressure on the return side gets up in excess of 0.2, 0.25, which it basically does when the filter starts to load, if you don't have nearly a free-flowing return, you're going to pull moisture off that coil, sling it to the bottom of the unit. And if you've ever had a system that's got, water in the bottom of the insulation, it's soppy, you've likely got a return problem. Well, no, it's the drain that's backing up. Yeah, because it's turning the drain into a return because it can't get enough air and it's allowing the pan to fill up, and it only drains when the system shuts off. Right. So, guys, go out there, invest the money in the tools that you need to do your job, right? Once you've used the tools long enough, you'll be able to walk in and look at a duct system. I can walk in without any tools now and look at the runs that are coming off the system, and I can calculate in my head how much capacity I've got. I know what size, how much capacity that trunk line's got. So get yourself the tools, though, first, so that you can show the clients what needs to be done. Now, how do we establish a need? Just going to run through a quick little, potential scenario that you could be in with a client. So let's say that we're in a garage, we're in Florida, we're with a client, we got an air handler that's a vertical air handler, and the duct system's undersized. I'm going to take that manometer and I'm going to set it up on top of the air handler, and I'm going to dial it in and make sure I do this every single time. I'll make sure I take it out of calibration, put it back in calibration, so there can be no question whether or not we're being thorough here. And then I'll ask the client, have you ever heard of duct pressure? I'll point out the little label and I'll say, do you see this right here where it says internal static pressure? What does that number say? And they'll go, it says 0.5. Got it. So this is like a blood pressure cuff for your air conditioner. I want you to think of your air handler here, this machine, as kind of like the heart. And all of the ductwork is like veins and arteries. What happens when we have, maybe we eat bad food and we have the linings of our arteries and our veins thickening? What happens to the pressure inside of our body? Don, role play with me.
Yeah, man, it's going to go up. Wow. It's going to have to work harder.
Right. And if you have high blood pressure and you don't do anything about it, maybe you don't even know about it. If you don't do anything about having high blood pressure, what happens?
Bad things. You might even have a heart attack.
You could have a heart attack. That's right. And or a stroke, correct?
Mm.
So we're going to go ahead and hook up the blood pressure cuff right now. And what we're looking for is for the number over here and the number over here to add up to less than that number. Okay. So I'll put the first one in the supply, make sure I'm 12 inches or so off of the machine, and hopefully 12 inches before any sort of takeoffs. And I'll take that number. I'll ask them what the number is. They'll say it's 0.49. I'll put it in the supply. What does that number read? 0.21. What do those add up to be? And they'll be like 0.7. So are we above or are we beneath the maximum allowed by the manufacturer? Right? And they're going to be like, we're above. And then I can do the calculations really quick. And we're actually precisely 40% higher than the maximum allowed by the manufacturer, aren't we? And did you know that for all intents and purposes, if they knew this, that they would probably void the warranty? Because this system is considered to be careful what you say here, because if you install the system, you get in trouble, because they would consider this to be improperly installed. Okay. Do you know what happens when you don't move enough air through a machine? So you didn't know that you have a 5-ton here, but you only have about 3 tons worth of capacity on the return. So you paid for a 5 and you're getting 3. Do you think that makes the machine work harder or not as hard? If a machine works harder, what does that do to its lifespan? What does that do to its reliability? Right? Did you know that the problem that we're having up here with all this growth is actually a result of this right here? Like, so there are a lot of questions that we can ask them that will help them to get to a place where they're wondering, what do we do about this? And if they ask you, what do we do about this? Obviously, we're on to our next steps in our sales process that we're not going to get into right now, but we're going to bring in herd and pack mentality, and we're going to give them a very quick solution and then share what life is like afterwards. And then we're going to give them to buy.
Hey, when you have that pitot tube, it's like an L-shaped tube. Isn't that right, Gene?
Yeah.
It's called
with
a
little
pitot
holes
tube.
on the side.
Yep. And a hole in the end, right?
Not on a pitot tube.
Okay.
No, just a straight one has got holes, one hole on the end, but a pitot tube comes to a point and its holes are on the side and they're spread out so that it gives you like 6 or 8 readings going back to the device.
And where, with that L shape, does it matter how you put that into the ductwork?
Certainly does. So you're going to stick it in the short side of the L is going to it's going to stick through and then go into the ductwork. And you want to face that L, that point, the point of the pitot tube. You want to face it with the airflow, the same direction the air is flowing, and you'll get an accurate reading.
Okay. So it can't point to the side.
Nope.
It's got to be perfect, kind of in line with the airflow. And that's what gives that reading down the side, is the laminar, the smooth airflow across the side of that tube.
Yeah, and you'll find, depending on where you put it in, you want to kind of try to put it in center mass with where the airflow is at, because if you're not putting it in the right place, or if you've got improperly designed ductwork, you'll start to see the needle wave around, and you'll have cavitation, air tumbling inside of the ductwork, which is not conducive to good airflow.
And that's why you go about 12 inches down, because hopefully that turbulent air, that's just swirling air, is started to smooth out through the ductwork so you can get the duct pressure there.
Yep. And then, guys, you can use them for other applications too. You can look up specifications on what coil you're working with and what sort of pressure drop it's supposed to have at the right amount of air moving through it. And you can actually take pressures across the coil to show that you've got a plugged coil without having to pull it if you got a difficult one to get to. A lot of different things you can do, but the main purpose of this lesson is to help you guys to understand the negative side effects of a client having an undersized duct system and a leaky duct system. So I hope we've delivered on that for you today. Don, anything else before we cash out of this podcast?
Well, a lot of guys do a good, better, best. Obviously, the sales process talks about the mandatory, what'll have to be done in the future, and the nice to have. And really, if you just put nice to have duct system in there, isn't that really a nice to have situation, to have new duct system, have it properly sized? I can make the argument that you're going to have to do it someday, where it would be in the near future. And you could absolutely make the argument that it's mandatory if you like. But the way to get this going is Mandatory is probably the blower cleaning, pull and clean. Let's make sure we're getting some airflow off that blower. And blower pull and clean, the technicians in us, that's what we want to say. But that's a feature more than anything. Let's talk about restoring airflow. Airflow restoration, but I even like to say it the other way, restore airflow, right?
Yeah.
Let's restore the airflow. That's a blower pull and clean. If a client calls up all your competitors and say, I want to get a price on restoring my airflow, they're going to struggle with throwing a price. But
Yeah.
if they just say, guy told me I just need to get my blower pull and clean, they're going to say $300. They're going to just quote it right over the phone. So start thinking, what does it do? We're going to restore the airflow. We might even have a duct cleaning. We might have enlarge the plenums as a near future. And then the nice to have is let's just rip out all this that's contaminated and start all over with an engineered duct system.
And personally, I would work the numbers in reverse in this scenario. I would put the ultimate best thing on the top, and then I would start taking stuff away from it. Personally, that's what I would do on this type of scenario. Don, before we take off, guys, the next live event is at Grand Hala Mansion in Reunion, Florida, which is just outside of Orlando. It's happening December 1st through 5th for selling technicians. And then it's also happening the 6th through the 9th. That's a different class. That's a high ticket class. So if you're selling anything over $20,000 on a consistent basis or attempting to, that's the class that you want to come to. There'll be people like comfort advisors and project managers and stuff like that there. So that one is the 6th through the 9th, also at Grand Hala Mansion in beautiful, sunny Florida. Come see us down in December. Come and mansion down below, or hit me with a text at 239-848-6533. 239-848-6533. We will absolutely change the trajectory of your financial life forever. I've always had a 100% money back guarantee on this program. If you come and after the first day, you don't feel like it is a good fit, or you feel like we're bullshit and you haven't even gotten here's the deal. You've got to feel like you've gotten your money's worth the very first day for me. I've never, ever had anybody take us up on it. I think that's because we deliver massive results. But guys, there is nobody that can increase the amount of money that you make that's a competitor of ours anywhere close to as fast as we can. We're literally talking about adding hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of income in 30 to 60 days. Right. I'm talking about tracking, right? So Luke just literally experienced this. Luke was making $50,000 a year his entire career in HVAC. He came to us in 2 weeks after the class, made $18,000. Okay, that's what used to take him 4 months to make. And we just had another success story this morning. He is absolutely crushing it. All right. And it's just because he's determined. All right. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, right? But I can learn from other people. Luke's same way. He's not the smartest guy in the world, but he's just following the process, trusting the process, and having phenomenal results. Right. Absolutely insane. Yep. Andrew will be coming to see us in December. Awesome. Look forward to that. He's bringing 5 other people from his company as well. So
Boom.
He'll be at the Comfort Advisor and High Ticket event. Good to see you, buddy. I look forward to seeing you back in training on Thursday. I didn't see you there this morning. Don, any last words? I'm
proud of everybody. The guys who get the most out of it, the training, because there's always someone who becomes a superstar you didn't predict. But the guys who get the most out of it are willing to put the effort in to learn, and then have the guts to actually go out and try it. And then once they try it, the success brings them back to saying, I want to learn more. I want to know more. I want to know more. So you got to have that ability to say that I'm going to put some effort into this for 30, 60 days. You're willing to push yourself. And then on the next call, once you learn something, you have to say to yourself, I'm willing to try it. Fail or success, you got to try it, because once you're willing to try it, we can fine tune we can fine tune and get it to be successful for you. So that's what we're looking for. People who willing to train, are able to listen to a different process, different opinion, as well as I'm willing to try it and see what happens. So
I'm going to say one more thing, and this is going to piss some people off, but I don't really care. If you are doing $2 million, $2.5 million a year, you ain't doing shit. I'm just going to say it. You're not. I've known people doing $3 million a year for the last 20 years or 20 years ago. All right. So if you think that making $250,000 a year that you have made it, you are sadly mistaken. And I can show you how to make the amount of money that you make in a year, guys, a lot of you, in a month. All right. If you're doing 2.5 million, I'll show you how to sell 5 million within the next 30 to 60 days. You'll be tracking at 5 million if you just are hungry and humble and listen. All right. So the seats are class, just so you know, they range between 6,500 to 10,000. But even if you spend 10,000, if I gave you 200 grand back, would that be a good return on your investment?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So put Mansion down below in the comments or hit me up on my cell 239-848-6533. We are signing out. Love you guys. See you next Tuesday. Or no, see you Thursday.
Yeah. Thanks.